from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. Got a fun show for you this evening. Appreciate you tuning in. We're going to start, Benjamin, with a report from Tony Pauline, Pro Football Network. You guys, you work with them pretty closely. And Tony Pauline, of course, we see him out there at the Senior Bowl. He's a pretty well-connected former scout, also an insider for Pro Football Network. And he put out a report this weekend about Drew Lock, about some of the things, the vibes he was hearing about Drew out at the Senior Bowl. And it kind of, spoke to a little bit, in my opinion, of the view of Drew Lock inside the building. It's not a 100% across the board. Everybody says this is the guy going forward. And so it feels to me, as he reported that the Broncos are not sold on Drew Lock and they might be looking to move on from Drew Lock, it seems to me that this also report could be taken on who are you actually talking to in the building could tell you a little bit of a different answer.
Right, and I think we need to go back to the wording on some of this too. Not being sold on doesn't mean you're not confident in. It means
point.
You're not totally confident in. It's not you're not 100% all in on this guy. You hope that he can become a certain thing, but you're also looking at other options. So it's important to remember, first of all, what that quote actually means.
But it matches what we've seen so far. I mean, they were in one way or another on the Matt Stafford deal. They did make the call.
Very likely, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, so the point of it is I think you're 100% right. Like, not being sold doesn't mean down on or don't think he has a chance.
Right, and that's the first important thing to remember here. But, there are people that understand. Drew is, and I say the phrase slow learner, but people get the wrong idea. I think this report really reflects on people's preconceived biases. If you came into this hating Drew Lock, you seized on this and say, see, the guy's dumb, he can't get the playbook. And so that's the part I'm trying to dance through here. They pared the playbook down, and it wasn't just for Lock. There was another player on that offense they pared it down for too. They pared down the playbook a little bit to kind of simplify things, find the things that they were good at, and work on executing that. Part of that was because they knew they were eliminated from playoff contention at that point and just wanted to get good reps in a game situation. Part of that was that there was so much going on that a lot of these guys in a brand new offense that are all very young and didn't have experience in this offense just weren't picking it all up, and you'd come in and mess things up. So they simplified it down and made the week's practice and the playbook for that game easier to understand for each of these guys. And I think when people understand it through that lens and understand it through that context, it makes a lot more sense. But headlines being what they are, oh, Drew Lock's an idiot. We made the playbook. We play number one. I always like that. What's that? That's that old Tecmo Bowl meme where it's got like the 3 plays, whatever.
Right.
That's not what happened. It's just that the West Coast offense is very verbiage enhanced. I think everybody's seen the John Gruden clips,
right?
Where John's spitting out the play and Chris Sims just looks like he's like befuddled. Chris Sims, the son of an NFL quarterback, is befuddled by the play call terminology. You can have, 12, 15 terms in one play call. And so a lot of these guys who did have simple play calls, green, red, one, things like that in college, struggle to catch up and remember what they're supposed to do in all of these situations and all these different plays and variations, and you get to the pro game. And so they tried to simplify it and make it easy for their young offense.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head right there about the preconceived bias. If you had a certain opinion about Drew Lock, this may reinforce that if you thought negatively of him. But if you did watch the games, you saw a quarterback looking more comfortable. And in the end, that's kind of the OC's job. Like if we can get into the nuanced conversation about whether Drew Lock will get there one day or not and all that. But in the end, what Pat Shurmur's job ultimately is to make things work for the offense, to work with the players that he has, not work with the playbook that he has created. So in my opinion, some of what we saw, and I'd love you to correct me if I'm wrong here, some of what we saw towards the end of the season was Pat Shurmur finally kind of clicking with a lot of the players he had on his roster.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. When you don't have a preseason, a full preseason and OTAs and all that kind of stuff to kind of get used to your guys, see what they can do, what they don't do, you have to do it in games. And that's what happened. And then Drew Lock got hurt. And then he was out for a while. And so you lost any of that continuity. You had to come back and start that over again. And if you look at the last 8 games of the season and you put Drew Lock into 2 separate categories for each of those 4 games, you'll see a significant improvement over the last 4 games. Really, it's over the last 6, but really improvement over the last 4, especially you can look at the numbers, you can look at whatever. And you can tell that that's what's happening as they started to come around on that. So, I think that these guys are just they're finding each other. They're getting better at this and getting better about this with each other and all that kind of stuff. And, I think going forward, if Drew Lock gets a shot, if he gets a shot, and he should get a shot in training camp, but if he gets the shot going forward, I'm hoping that he can become a starting caliber quarterback in this league.
But you didn't take the premise of that report as a holy cow, the Broncos are absolutely heading in one direction or the other, because that's kind of what I think a lot of people drew out of that is they kind of said, okay, well, this is very clearly that the Broncos are down on Drew Lock, or this is very clearly one way or the other. I didn't take that out of it, but again, people will kind of read into it. I was listening to Ian Rappaport, who joined our buddy Cody Rourke on the Locked On Broncos podcast. It was a really good interview. You should check it out. But I was listening to that, and he pointed out where he thinks the Broncos are going to quarterback. He basically put it out as we've been saying on the show. It'll be Drew Lock in competition. He likes higher level competition there, but again, what's the trade and how much does it actually cost? More so free agents. But he pointed out a very important word. He said if the Broncos are going to be in on one of the big name quarterbacks, it has to be quote unquote remarkably better. Mm-hmm. So you're not going after Carson Wentz.
Right.
You're not going after guys that have some really questionable qualities about whether or not they're actually going to ever get back to the prominence they were or ever get to the prominence. It also made me wonder if Sam Darnold really is not going to be one of the guys that the Broncos make a run at.
You have to define run. They're not going to trade 2 seconds for Sam Darnold. If Darnold's available for a cheap, kind of late round pick kind of thing, or he gets free agency, they'll be in on that. And that's the same thing I've been trying to tell you guys from the beginning. If the Broncos really weren't sold on Drew Lock, they would have been all in on Matt Stafford. They would have been all in on any other option. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. They're not done with Drew Lock. They think that he has potential, but they want to hedge their bet.
And that's kind of a good point. And that's the thing. You would have been all in on Matt Stafford because you don't know if you're going to get Deshaun Watson, because you don't even know if he's going to become available.
And I reiterate, I don't think he's going to be traded. I've said that over and over again. I want to say that on the TV show here. I don't think he's going to be traded.
All right. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about Justin Simmons. Some reports about being a franchise tag player again. We'll debunk it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight, talking about quarterbacks. Now we're going to shift things over to the defensive side and talk about the star of the Broncos defense, and that is Justin Simmons. At least right now, he's one of the stars. Now, there was a report coming out this last weekend, Ben, about Justin Simmons potentially getting franchise tagged again for the second time. You and I've talked about this on the show, so this isn't new to us necessarily. But I think we kind of have to kind of play this out a little bit. What does that look like? You've reported for a really long time that if Justin is tagged a second time, first of all, he wouldn't be thrilled with it. But more than anything, it would be a placeholder for future negotiations, and it would basically show the Broncos' intent to bring him back without anybody else entering the picture.
Yeah, so we've talked about this at length on the radio show, but let's set the table again here over what we've discussed for the last, I think it's about 2.5 months with this. The Broncos probably will re-tag Justin Simmons. That's not to get him to play on the tag this time, though, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure that Justin would play on the tag. I think he would be okay sitting out on it. The Broncos do want to get a long-term deal done. The problem is that there comes a certain window. After a certain date, you can't negotiate with somebody on the tag anymore. They passed that date last summer with no deal getting done, and Justin had to play on the tag. Well, the tag expires at the end of the year, and the Broncos have no mechanism to keep Justin and keep negotiations exclusive between them except to re-tag him. So that's what they're going to do here. Because if they don't, then people like the Cleveland Browns will come and offer a significantly larger contract, and the Broncos wouldn't have the opportunity to compete to re-sign Justin Simmons. I'll also tell you the Raiders would offer as well. And
they have they're seventh right now in cap space. They can obviously make a few more moves, but right now that's where so there are teams ahead of them. There are teams that can move heaven and earth, if you will.
There are teams that have a higher dollar amount assigned to the value of the safety position than the Broncos do.
Right. And the Broncos, of course, if and when they do decide to pay Justin Simmons, they will have the highest paid safety tandem in the league. So that's something that they have to kind of keep in mind here too. But
exactly.
Kareem Jackson only have 1 year left on his deal.
You can pay some. You can do that. You can afford to have 2 high paid safeties if you have a quarterback on a rookie deal and or pass rusher or rushers on a rookie deal. So
interesting.
It's interesting how that sets up.
Check those boxes. Anyways, continue.
But I've spoken with Justin this offseason, and he's looking forward to this process. He wants to be in Denver. He wants to be in Denver long term, and he understands the nature of the business and how this stuff goes, but he would be very frustrated if they did not get a long-term deal done. So, again, this report about franchise tagging him again, this is purely a negotiating mechanism because once the Broncos tag Justin again, no one can negotiate with him, right, except for the Broncos. So the idea is you tag him, you keep putting your offer in front of Justin, you hope to get a long-term deal done, and then you can rescind the tag, sign the long-term deal, and be done with it. And that keeps teams that would absolutely offer Justin, teams like the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders, and both of them would be in, offering him long-term deals.
The Broncos are set right now. I think a lot of our conversation on the show about the draft are set right now for a bit of a rebuild on the defensive side. But you can't really rebuild all of it, like not through one draft. You kind of still need those pillars, those cornerstone players, and Justin certainly seems like he's one of them.
Oh, he is. And you look around, Mike Purcell, they got him done last year. They haven't really found anybody that's able to play the nose the way he does. Shelby's been kind of a glue guy. They hope to get him done. You look at Bradley Chubb on the rookie deal. I think if you're the Broncos, you take care of the guys that you drafted and developed. That instills a new culture, and for a new general manager, that's going to be big. This Justin Simmons deal is going to set the tone for his tenure as a general manager. So for George Payton, this is important. Last thing you want is a person revered through the locker room and the community to become angry at you because you didn't get the deal done. So just something to keep your eye on. This is going to be a tone setter for the Broncos for the next 6 years.
Well, especially when you say in your intro press conference, we are about draft and develop. And he came from an organization that made that the cornerstone of their franchise. We draft, we develop, we keep our guys. The Broncos really haven't been that kind of team.
They really haven't.
Not in the last few years.
They really haven't. They've let guys go. John Elway hasn't been that bad a drafter over the years. The Broncos have simply just let a lot of those guys go, whether it was Malik Jackson or Matt Paradis or, guys. They've let guys throughout the
they develop them and then let them walk.
Julius Thomas. Now, you don't want to really pay Julius. I think that was more Peyton Manning than anything else. But you go back and you look at the guys that they drafted and look at the guys they let walk and how some of them are excelling other places. Isaiah McKenzie, for instance. So, that's I think. I think the thing you need to look at is how to you're hitting actually on these draft picks. How do you keep them?
And the Broncos obviously would like to keep many of these guys, but more so than that, I think fans probably should have it in their mind. You don't want to be big players in free agency. Of all things being equal, I mean, I know we get all excited about that and what's next and who can they add and how can they plug some of these holes. But in the end, it's a belief in your own guys. And so the Broncos in the past, it's not so much, I think, showing that they don't believe in their guys. It's that they don't believe in the price that they're going to get on the open market. So this one is going to be an interesting spot because Justin Simmons, as you mentioned, has done everything right. He's done everything right in the community. He's done everything right on the field. If we're quibbling over whether he's top 5, top 3, or top 2, I think that the Broncos end up losing in that scenario because more people will pay him as the top safety because that's just what free agency is.
Right. And to go back to your point, which is a very good one that people often overlook, you do not want to be a player in free agency. If you're a big player in free agency, it means one of two things. One, you're terrible at drafting, or two, you're terrible at keeping the guys you drafted. And so that's really the thing. In free agency, you pay A+ money for B+ talent usually. Not a lot of great top-tier guys hit free agency because most of those teams keep their star players. So there's something to keep your eye on this offseason, just something to keep your eye on when the Broncos go into this, because I don't think Denver's going to be big players in free agency.
No, but they need to draft some safeties. Like they need to be looking at safety.
They need depth.
They needed that coming into the season, but they need to be thinking a couple of years beyond this.
They do. The secondary is really going to get a lot of work, I think, throughout the draft. You might see a free agent corner picked up, but I really think that this secondary is going to get a lot of work in the draft this year.
All right. Speaking of the secondary, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the corner because it seems like everybody is mocking corners to the Broncos early in the draft and often in the first 3 rounds. I want to talk about the scenarios, why that makes sense and why it doesn't. We'll get to that coming up next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Let's talk cornerbacks. The Broncos, in almost every mock you see out there, are taking either Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley there at number 9. You see some people mocking the Broncos trading back, maybe taking a J.C. Horn, taking somebody with one of the premium picks, taking a cornerback. Now, one of the conversations I wanted to have today, because we know that cornerback specifically is a developmental position. You saw last year with Jeffrey Okudah. He struggled out in Detroit. Now, I thought he was as close to can't miss at cornerback as you could possibly get. That's why he was taken inside the top 5. But the fact is, whatever you're drafting there, whether it's at 9 or back into the first round, second round, third round, it doesn't really matter. They are developmental. The expectations have to be kept there, and I think we need to keep that in mind. So the fact is, the Broncos probably need to be leaning pretty heavy in free agency if they really want to, I guess, roster or put out a starting caliber group in the secondary, because they don't really have that right now.
Yeah, I think the expectation last year with Ojemudia and Bassi was that those were guys that were going to be depth corners. They'd get play time, but it would be rotational depth behind Bouye, Callahan, and some of the other guys that they had there. I mean, they had year 2 guys coming in. Devontae Harris was, had been in the system a while. He was coming back. Devontae Bosby had been in the system, was coming back. Harris didn't work out. He's with the Ravens now. Bosby, kind of got jerked around a little bit. I think that Ojemudia and Bassi were thrust into playing more than they had envisioned. I agree with you in a sense. I think they need to do both. I think they need to go to free agency and pick up at least one more veteran corner, because you can't have too many. Look at last year. And then I think you probably also need to go to the draft and make sure you've addressed the secondary to your satisfaction.
Well, no, you want to do that. I'm not saying don't draft a cornerback, but I'm talking about the scenarios where it's not going to be guaranteed a corner. Because right now, I'm 100%. If we're doing a mock draft today after you released A.J. Bouye, of course you have to mock a cornerback to the Broncos. Why wouldn't you?
It's the biggest hole.
You don't even have the requisite amount to start out there right now. So it makes all the sense in the world, and I want a premium guy that you can develop. I'm just saying, for most NFL teams, they don't want to go into the draft saying that we absolutely have to get this position. Aside from quarterback is always different. But we absolutely have to draft a cornerback here at 9, because if we don't even really have the talent to play at the NFL level. And you know what the league has become. Right. It's become a league where you have to have dominant secondaries.
Right. And I think you want to not be pigeonholed, because if people know what you're doing, then the people who also need that same position group will look to leapfrog you in the draft.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely a point to that. And I agree. You need at least one, but I think you need one starting caliber corner, and then probably 2 or 3 guys that you expect to compete for a nickel or dime spot, and then you can whittle your roster down from there. I think that's what you would need to go into the draft and not tip your hand if you were taking a corner at the beginning or if you were taking something else.
Okay, so what do you think about my idea of actually bringing in 2 free agent cornerbacks? Bringing in overspending at the position.
I'm suggesting more, actually.
Okay.
But the difference is I'm suggesting one in the A.J. Bouye mold, that tier of player, and then I'm suggesting 2 or 3 in the more Devontae Harris, Devontae Bosby tier of player. Depth guy.
And a guy that we probably have to talk about a little bit more as we approach training camp is a guy like Parnell Motley, because he strikes me as sort of in that same tier, and you already just acquired him right towards the end of the season.
I thought he played pretty well.
Yeah, showed a lot of hustle.
So I'd love to see him come back and see what he can do with a year's experience and go through training camp in this scheme. I always thought he was talented. He was a guy we talked about extensively before the draft.
So you're not going to be a major player, because last year it was Byron Jones, right? Last year Byron Jones.
No, you're not going to be in on that kind of stuff. Now,
okay.
I tell you what, if Patrick,
I think the top guy right now is like William Hill or something like that. Maybe Patrick Peterson.
He's fallen off quite a bit, but Patrick Peterson can play well within the confines of the scheme, and if he's available for the right price, I would look at that.
Yeah,
I would definitely, but I'm not going out and spending prime Patrick Peterson money for Patrick Peterson that I'm getting at this point.
What can you lean on? Like, what do you know about your secondary? Let's take the safeties out for a second. Let's talk about the corners. What do you know about your corner room that you feel really strong that you can just say that guy, that's a starter for me, and I can have a certain level of expectations based on his play last year?
I don't think you have that.
That's what I'm saying.
Bryce Callahan is a great corner when he's on the field, and his history shows that he's going to miss half a season usually. I thought Ojemudia showed flashes, but then he's also got some rookie boneheaded moments where he kind of allows other things to get in his head and loses focus. I thought Essang Bassi was good for an undrafted guy, but he can't cover speed guys in this league, and man, he just can't. He just doesn't. He's just not able. I thought Parnell Motley showed a lot, but he was incredibly raw and just a guy they threw out there and was learning on the fly. So I don't think there is that level of confidence. I do think, like I said, you probably need 3 free agent corners, one that's in that starting tier, and 2 more that are probably just in that, in that competitive.
I think it's funny. We spend so much time, and this is, on Twitter or wherever, on the show, talking about quarterbacks, when in reality, the position that had the most question marks right now is
cornerback.
Corner. And it is the reason why, again, we're talking about it, because it's mocked so high for the Broncos. But honestly, as we're sitting here today, you just laid out the guys. If you had to roll with those, then again, you're going to add somebody. Like, there's no reason you're not going to add somebody.
You went into the season with those guys, you're puffing at a brown bag.
If your prize corner is Surtain or Farley, and I like those players a lot, understanding it's a developmental position, what if he has a Jeff Okudah kind of year? What if he has a year where he takes a lot of lumps? He's going to get picked on quite a bit. And he is, because when you're a rookie in this league, they're looking for you as soon as you come on the field. They want to see what you're made of.
Right.
And so he would be your CB1 right away. And honestly, maybe he lives up to that standard, or maybe he needs a year to get there. But we've already seen the patience level of Broncos fans when it comes to the quarterback position. How do you think that's going to work if the Broncos spend a top 10 pick on a corner, and that guy's expected to be CB1 the day he walks in the building, and he doesn't ever do that, at least not in year one?
Well, it's a bad look. I mean, I guess it'd be a good thing you paid both your safeties. You can see me winking on camera right now. Paid both your safeties to make sure they can cover for those corners, right? But I think that it's something that bears watching. It's something you definitely need to keep your eye on going into this offseason.
All right. Looking forward to it. We'll continue to talk about it on Broncos Country Tonight, the TV show and the radio show. Thanks for watching.